What's up, everybody, and welcome back to hyPODermic, the pod that sticks you deep. I'm the pod boss, TJ Bowser, and joining me, as always, is the maestro of mayhem, the dawn of disaster, the legend himself, Mr. Nick Benson. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you doing today?
Better now that I'm talking to you. We have a awesome episode planned for today. Lots of cool stuff we're going to talk about, but I'm going to let you do the intro, Nick, as always.
All right. So today's guest is relatively new to me. I kind of ran across this guy haphazardly. Oddly enough, I tried to do a little research on him, and he comes up as Goth Dad. But his band is really a throwback to a lot of 80s bands that I really, really love. And today's guest, guys, is Dusty Gannon of Vision Video.
Oh, did we lose audio?
There we go. Hey, Nick, how's it going? How are you?
I'm good, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a total honor. So
absolutely,
really cool.
It's great to have you here, and I am absolutely thrilled to have you on, because the second I saw your band and all of the Goth Dad stuff that you do, I was just like, this guy is right up my alley, man. He's
Hell
so
yeah.
cool.
That's great.
So it's an honor to have you on. But this is all about you, really. I want to get people familiar. You already have a pretty good following, but like, I want to get my viewers familiar with you, because I know a lot of my viewers like that same music, and they might not be familiar with your band, and certainly might not be familiar with Goth Dad, which I think is one of the most awesome things on YouTube, period. So take me back a little bit and talk about what brought you to do that. Like, I know you have a military background, and you've been a firefighter, so like there's a lot there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like with Vision Video and sort of the Goth Dad thing and all that, it kind of rolls back to, I guess, I grew up with music. My family was really musical, so I always loved music, and I like started playing guitar at a young age, but I never took like very guided lessons. I just kind of learned as I went along. I messed around and found out, as they say. And but like moving through my time like into the military, when I joined the Army and all that, I just kept doing music as a kind of an outlet. So when I realized that I was kind of done with the military, I moved back here to Athens, Georgia, which is where I went to college. I have like a BA in religion, which is basically a history degree. And I was going to go to grad school, but I ended up becoming a firefighter in the metro Atlanta area instead. And I did that for several years until this kind of took off musically. And I never really like intentionally was like trying to make music my career choice, because it's like kind of conceivably a bad choice. It's very insecure and like crazy. And especially being somebody that's worked for the government like most of their adult life, I was like, oh shit, this is all up to me now. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, like, so, Vision Video is, for those of you not familiar, we're kind of like a post-punk goth rock band. We take a lot from the 80s, from my favorite bands. We take a lot of nods from, as we were mentioning just before the podcast started, the March Violets, the Chameleons. That's like probably my favorite band is the Chameleons. The Sound. The Cure, some of the more obvious ones. But I just love that time of music. But I also don't want to just do something that's like totally contrived and derivative. I want to make something that's a little new. So we add a little bit of kind of like modernity to it. Sure. And I think that, the other members of the band bring a lot of that aspect to it as well. So, we started working on this band in like 2018, and, we got into sort of the pandemic era, which I think really just shook the music industry on its head, because that was like when we were starting to put out music.
Absolutely.
And, we went from being just kind of like this local Athens band to the lockdown. And then in the lockdown, I was a paramedic firefighter. So I had 24 hours on at work, and then I'd be off for 48. So I'd just come home and I had nothing to do. I mean, I was just like, well, everything that I love, I can no longer really do right now. I can't go, I live like really close to downtown Athens, and I can walk down to the 40 Watt and go see a show. Like, I'm going to go do that tomorrow night. We're going to go see our drummer's other band. Like, we walk downtown a lot. So that was just gone. And I just saw like, social media kind of changing. And I was like, all right, well, here's an opportunity for me to just like get this band out there so that, and my initial goal is just like to get it out there so that we could go on tour and like afford to do that. And that was kind of it. I was just like, if we do that one day, that'd be cool. And not just like lose every cent that we have. So I started making videos. Initially I had no idea, and I still don't know what the hell I'm doing, but a lot of it was just like, makeup tutorials. So when I was, and this is another kind of throwback, when I was a kid, I wanted to do special effects makeup for film. Very cool. I kind of self-taught. Like I lived in rural Georgia, so I was like out in the middle of nowhere. Right. And I had like the Tom Savini VHS and like the books and all, and I just did this and, and I learned kind of how I typically learn, which is just like messing around. But so with that background knowledge, I had some idea of like how to do kind of like goth makeup, just because it's the same principles,
Sure.
And so I started doing like some tutorial stuff and a lot of like hyper cringy, like just bad, dumb videos. And then one day, so I write these things, I call them scratch tracks. It's like when I'm trying to develop a melody, for guitar and the vocal melody, especially, and like how that works with the guitar, I'll just kind of like make up lyrics. I'll make up like, sometimes it's literally nonsense and sometimes it's like a funny joke kind of lyric. And one day I was like writing the song and I was like, I had this image because I just talked to my dad and I just met Dan's dad, and who's our bass player. And I was like, wouldn't it be funny if there was like this 50s dad who was like goth, like hyper, like not just like the TV version. He like knew his shit, Yeah. And I got that line in my head. It's like, it kind of goth dad. It's kind of embarrassing, but still kind of cool. Goth dad. He'll brag all about how he saw The Cure back in the 80s. Goth dad. So I like wrote that and I recorded it. And I was like, I mean, this is not even the melody that I want for the song. And I think we just kind of threw the song away. But I showed it to Dan. I like called him. And I was like, hey man, what do you like? This is funny, I think. And he's like, dude, that's hilarious. He's like, you need to post that on, whatever. Because at this point, we had already kind of built a little bit of a following online. And then it just like exploded.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, I'd never had that many people just suddenly aware of my existence. And I'm still not like hyper comfortable with it. Because at the end of the day, I kind of hate social media. Like we all, like as artists, we all have to operate within the confines of the sort of like what we do. Oh, there's goth dad. But, but it also like opened these insane doors for us. And, over time doing these kind of like, I didn't realize. So when I posted the video, people were like, oh, that's hilarious. What does he do? And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, it's a joke song. And they're like, he's a character, right? He's like a guy. And I was like, oh, I can make this like a shtick.
Yeah.
So, I like having met Dan's dad, he's like his parents are from the Midwest. Dan's from, Michigan, like Waukesha. I like, or Wisconsin rather. I like something about that, like Minnesota, Wisconsin, like hyper wholesome accent. It's just so like American to me. And like I said, just wholesome. So I was like, oh geez, that's pretty funny. I think that like, maybe that's what goth dad sounds like.
Yeah.
Such a dad kind of thing. So I put that on there and then it's like, oh, hi there, baby bats. How you doing? Let me show you this stuff about goth subculture. Let me show you spooky, weird shit. And, and like he sort of developed into this character of, everything that I really wish that I like was. He's like everything that I aspire to be as a person. He's like patient and kind and loving and
cool
and tries to kind of bring the baby bats into the fold of like, here's all the stuff that I think matters in a healthy way. Because when I was coming into sort of the goth scene in the early 2000s, it was very toxic. It was very like judgy and gatekeepy and weird. And like you'd go to clubs and you'd be like I was 18. I was like, this isn't fun. Like everybody's mean. And like,
right.
So I kind of wanted to flip the script on that. And the other part of it is like, I realized like that 90% of like kind of self-promotion on these newer platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels and all this stuff, it's inherently kind of like cringy to me, where it's like, I just don't. So I was like, why don't I flip the script on that and make the cringiest thing possible a dad? Like dad.
Well, what's great about it is you're doing this. First of all, you're doing this you picked a great time to do it and get yourself in front of people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're kind of the antithesis of where you're doing it. You know what I mean? You're doing. You're sending a positive message to a more than negative narcissistic crowd. So,
yeah,
it's kind of cool that you're doing that, because it does teach people that it's okay for certain things and certain behaviors, and maybe you're sending a positive message out there,
right,
to kids that are otherwise confused, and believe me when I tell you, there is a lot more of that than you think there is.
Oh yeah,
Kids are struggling these days.
And I didn't really understand like the sort of cultural impact, I guess I would say, about like what Goth Dad was to people until we started to tour, and then it became very blatantly obvious, because you see comments all the time like, "Oh, this is really great. I appreciate this stuff," and I value that, but it's not until you're like face to face with somebody where they say, "Hey, like, I know that you're like, I just see these little 30-second videos, and like, it's not a huge deal, but like, I didn't have a dad growing up." And just to see that and like have a male, sort of like role model to kind of give me advice on this, it's like, it's cool, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like, and I didn't comprehend that until I started to get out there and actually interact face to face with people. And that's like made it, like, there was a time where I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this. Like, after it kind of blew up, I was like, do I really want to like continue to do this like hammy shtick thing? But over time, I realized the value it had for people, and that became way more important than like my own concern for like, ugh, like this is kind of silly. I don't know. It means a lot to me now.
But that's what's great about it, is you keep it light, but at the same time, you're sending a message, and it's extremely important in today's culture, especially in the climate we're in now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, we're in a really volatile climate these days. And,
yes.
I couldn't be more tickled to see somebody like you out there doing this. Awesome. I work with a charity for LGBTQ kids, and there's some of them are goth, and they're confused, and they don't have role models. They've been rejected by what were supposed to be their role models. So seeing you out there doing this just really fills my heart.
That's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So thank you for what you do. And
absolutely.
Go ahead and continue. I just had to interject that for a minute.
No. But yeah, so I mean, I guess like continuing on the timeline of the story, so to speak, we kind of built this audience, and it really continued to grow. We put out our first record in, I guess it was 2021 in spring. Mm-hmm. The second one came out last year in October, and around about a year and some change ago, I kind of started to feel like, I've been in the military for long. Like, I was in the military for a long time, and then I was in the fire department for like just under 5 years, and I'd been through a lot, and my brain was like kind of at the point where I was like, I think I've seen enough. Like, I have no more morbid curiosity about things. Like, I've been through some really like bad situations.
Sure.
And I was like, I was just kind of getting my ropes end with it, where I was kind of burnt out. So I was looking for maybe something else to do for a little while anyway. And the band was just like, we were able to stand on our 2 feet. So I put in my resignation. I was like, all right, I'm going to go try this music thing for a year and see what happens. And like, my chief of my district in our fire department came up to me, before I left, and he was like, and this is like a tough, like hard line dude. Like, he's been doing this for like 25, 30 years. Right. And he was like, Dusty, look, we love you, and like, you work hard here, you're valued here, go do this, go do it with everything you got. And you have a year to come back, and you just like come right back in. Right. So, I mean, I guess it's a testament that we're doing okay since it's been longer than a year now. And like, for me, it's always there if I want to go back to it.
Right.
But this has been such a like satisfying thing to just like be able to travel and make art and just like I said, just get face to face with people and like understand that like what you're creating has impact on people in like very literal ways, which
absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard, as an artist, like you just make something and everything I make is for me first,
Sure.
not to be like totally self-interested, but I think that's the best way that art is served is you write something or create something and then you let it like heal you,
right,
and fill a purpose for you, and then you put it out there and then hopefully it like resonates.
Sure.
It's so satisfying to know that has happened, at least to some extent.
It's nice to see that what was your catharsis has turned into something that's become an income. Like how can you ask for better than that? Even for myself, it was like I started out as a musician and I sort of fell into all the effects stuff.
Yeah,
I was working in the industry, but I still was in a band and we were trying to do it, and it wasn't really going anywhere, and I wound up kind of falling into effects, and that just took over. But that being said, like very similarly to what you're saying, it was a very cathartic thing to be doing and creating that stuff. And then for me, I didn't realize the impact that the things that I had my hands in had the impact that it did until much later in life, till I think the first time was like 2016.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, I did my first convention in 2016, and I realized, wow, people coming up to me, talking to me about how this movie or that movie or whatever I did in that film, they thank me. And, it's a very strange feeling, but at the same time, it makes you want to sit and talk with them longer. It makes you want to engage with those people. And I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm one of those people for you, man. This is a cool thing for me to just be here, because like there's so many things that you've been a part of that, that I truly love and value, because for me, like I'm a huge, obviously, horror fan. And, I think like the thing about people with horror movies, I spent a long time at one point, like wondering why I was into all this stuff. Like, why am I so, being somebody with like PTSD and like having seen really horrible things, like why do I continue to kind of like watch these things?
Yeah.
And what I realized is that it is sort of like controlled chaos, and it's like you're sort of exposing yourself to these like awful things, but it's like exciting and fun because it's safe. But it's also like there's something about this like community of people that get it. And maybe it is like a little more nebulous and unknowable. And like, I can't quite put my finger on exactly why I love all this stuff or why all of us love this stuff. But when you're in the company of people that are in this world, it's like, it's just that sense of community of being like, like, man, I love this movie. And I don't, maybe you don't even know how to articulate it, but it's like, when you find that other person, you're like, yeah, this is cool. I don't feel alone about this. And I remember
you find your tribe, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember like, for me, like Night of the Demons, man, like that was a huge moment in my life, because that introduced me heavily to Bauhaus, but it also just like introduced me to this like kind of horror that I genuinely love, which is like, it's really creepy, but it's also like fun as hell.
Yeah.
And, and I think there's like a specific subgenre that people haven't quite like tacked onto that, but I put like Night of the Demons, like Lamberto Bava's Demons, The Return of the Living Dead. Like, it's kind of like party horror. I don't like,
sure.
But I love that. Like, cause it's
fun.
exciting, but it's also
it's fun. They're scary, but they don't take themselves too seriously.
Yeah. I was actually watching this like documentary the other day that's one of the special bonus features on The Return of the Living Dead Part 2's Blu-ray, which is like not the best movie in the world, but I still love it. I think it's hilarious and fun. But one of the guys, I think it was one of the producers, but he was saying, the reason it's kind of a weird documentary too, because it's all these like people that are like, this movie kind of sucks and nobody really liked it and we didn't really want to do it, but we did it anyway. There's a lot of like, but the one guy says something that I was like, that's spot on. He's like, the reason why the first movie is great is because it's a horror movie with some comedy in it. The second one's not great because it's a comedy movie with some horror in it.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I've always just loved like when there's levity, because I think it really helps with pacing in films, like horror films, especially. Because like I can tell you, like having been through like a war and like horrible, like way worse things than the war in Atlanta, like there's moments of levity even when things are really fucked up.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's one of those things that like resonates, I think, for people like us with messed up brains, where we go, oh, like I get, like they get that sort of thing in horror, and that I identify with that. And that's really cool.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting to hear you talk about it, because knowing what you've like been through as a soldier and then a firefighter, those are two of probably the most graphic jobs you could have ever done.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with the worst of the worst situations in both.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that horror and music became so cathartic for you for that.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing.
I remember this one time when I was way younger. This is like maybe the early 2000s, before I joined the Army or anything. And I remember watching another documentary on a DVD then for the remake of Night of the Living Dead, Tom Savini's version. And they interviewed him, and they're talking about the process of how he got to that point where George A. Romero was like, hey, I want you to do this movie. Like, we're going to do the remakes. I want you to direct it or whatever. And he was talking about how he got, drafted to Vietnam. And there's this like kind of moment where he's talking about like, he's like, oh, I was a combat photography guy in Vietnam. And he's like, I was seeing all these really visceral, real, grotesque, anatomical deaths. And, he's like, when I came back, I wanted to kind of hyper simulate that and get it as correct as I could. And there's something to that. There's like this level of catharsis. And I've met a lot of people in the military, of veterans or like first responders, who love horror for that reason. It's like, there's just something about it that speaks to us, because when you're around chaos for a long time, you sort of make friends with it after a while, and then you miss it too. Like, I don't miss like horrible things happening. Like, obviously I don't, I hate it when things are happening to people and that cannot do something to defend themselves or whatever. But you do miss the sense of like that, like calm that comes in the middle of the chaos, where you're like, all right, here's what we got to do. You know? And I get like a sense of that when I'm watching a horror movie. I still get this like excitement and feeling of like, oh, what's going to happen? I don't know.
It's the adrenaline rush in a safe space.
Yes, exactly.
Which is kind of a beautiful thing.
Mm.
And it's believe it or not, it's that way creating that stuff too.
Yeah. How did you get into like what brought you into that world?
Honestly, I really literally fell into it, and most of the listeners know all of that story, but I'll tell you, it's literally, I was in a band and I became roommates with my guitarist, and Steve Johnson was the other roommate. And Steve Johnson, as you know, worked on Ghostbusters and Fright Night and all of that. And I was kind of blown away that I had the opportunity to not only be roommates with this guy, but I could pick his brain for stuff I wanted to do on stage, right?
Yeah.
Well, as I started to pick his brain and he saw more and more of the makeup I was doing on myself, he just one day asked me, do you want to come make Rubber Monsters? And how can you possibly turn that down?
Yeah. No, I'll pass. Like, oh,
yeah, I just, it's like, I can get paid for this? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
No, I'm not kidding. So yeah, it was.
What kind of band was it?
Goth. It was actually a band called London After Midnight.
Oh shit! Oh, that's right. Yeah, my brain. Yeah, that's awesome. I actually just saw London After Midnight at Cruel World.
Sean is a super talented songwriter. Yeah. I co-wrote some stuff with him early, and then literally Steve stole me from the band and he brought other people in.
Yeah. Yeah, they're still rocking it. So that's awesome. It's funny when my brain is so like scattered right now, but yeah, I like that's such a cool thing because like I remember finding was it Spider and the Fly?
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is fucking great. Like this is so good. Like when I was a kid, and it was one of those songs that's like it just really captures like the kind of mystery and like the creepiness of goth, I think. Like, perfectly.
Yeah, that song actually started with a guy named David Herman. Mondo was the original singer, and myself, and we sort of brought the riff into the mix, gave it to Sean, and Sean turned it into Spider and the Fly, which is just absolutely cool. I mean, I love it's what he's done with some of that stuff is amazing, and I even the early stuff I co-wrote with him, I'm like, this needs to stay with this band. So never asked for any of it.
Yeah, I'm excited because some of our new stuff that we're working on with this third record that'll be out next year is like shifting in that kind of direction. It's more like to the rock side of goth rock. I think our first like 2 records are very like more in the world of The Cure. And they're very like, jangly and pretty, and like we're Athens bands. This is jangle pop capital. REM, the B-52s, Pylon. Like that's what, and I love all those bands. And I've definitely taken nods from them as well. But I've this third record is just forming to be kind of more of a like angry, like I spent a lot of time being very sad about things that I've been through. And I think that was kind of the first 2 records. And now I'm just kind of like so frustrated. And I find myself just like, reading about what's going on in the world, all over the world.
Absolutely.
Just being so angry that we're not learning anything. We're just sort of making these same mistakes, especially in this country.
Running in circles, kicking our own asses.
And it's like no more obvious than like what's going on right now. We're like at the precipice of like maybe a major war again, and I'm like, what? Like, why are we doing this? This is so stupid and so senseless.
Profits.
And it really just boils down to money. I mean, when I got off the C-130 in Afghanistan with my rifle platoon, I was an infantry officer. Former enlisted, but infantry officer at the time. And I had 30 guys, and we like got off that plane, and we flew in from Kyrgyzstan to Kandahar airfield, and that like ramp dropped at that C-130, and I got hit with that 120-degree air, and I was like, oh God. And we walked out, and I was like, and like, I was so like mentally just like, all right, here it is. Like, we're here. This is the war, and I'm like, all right. We get out, and I'm like, got all my guys. I'm like, let's go. We get out, and it's not like you're not like under fire. It's like the big airfield, but you have this sense of like there's this sort of like reverence that comes over you. But then we like go through this like terminal and check in, and then it's like there's like a TGI Friday and like a pizza and like all these contractors, and I'm like, what is this? And you realize the scope of how big this base is. It's like 50,000 people.
Sure.
And you're like, what? And most of them, or not most, but like a lot of them are not soldiers. They're contractors. They're like people that wash the clothes, people that repair the trucks, people that, feed the troops. Like, and it's all stuff that used to be done by soldiers, but now it's done by, multi-billion-dollar international corporations that thrive and profit off of warfare. And the whole time we were there, like we're out there patrolling in the city of Kandahar and then in the surrounding villages. And it was just like, we were the last official combat deployment. So it was like, my soldiers would literally be like, what are we doing? And I was like, we're taking care of each other. We're doing it right. And we're going to stay safe as we can. And we're all going to get home. And we did. And that was cool. But it was like, every day, like not so much in the city, but when you're in the villages out in the outskirts, because it's like unimproved roads, it's just dirt roads, and that's where you can just like step on a pressure plate and
and
have your legs blown off. Then you're like looking around and you're trying to keep your head up into the hills and into the buildings and stuff so you don't get shot.
Yep.
You're also like looking at the ground and you're like, is that bump going to be like, is that bump? And you're just like, at some point you're just like, screw it, man. Like whatever. Like I was actually talking to somebody on Instagram the other day, because there was this like post about like Toyotas are like all over Afghanistan for some reason. Like I guess they're cheaply made cars or whatever, and they're just commonly available. But like there's this one moment like of hilarity where I was in the MRAP, like, which is a big like armored vehicle, and I'm on the radio, and we would get these like things called bolos. It's be on the lookout. And it was like, hey, be on the lookout for like a guy wearing this or whatever, it's like possible suicide bomber. Cause we had like these intelligence people that would listen into these radio interceptors where they could listen to the Taliban talking to each other. So like one time we were out in the middle of like the city, and there was this like big bolo alert. It was like, hey, no shit. Like there is somebody in a white Toyota Corolla that is like in a suicide, like a V-bed, which is a vehicle-borne IED, and they are in your area, and we're hearing communications that like they are trying to find you. And I was like, oh shit. So I'm like, all right, hey, we got to like everybody keep your shit together. Gunners, like we have 4 trucks. Gunners, be on the lookout. White Toyota Corolla, and my gunner, like he's like kind of behind me because I'm in the front of the vehicle. He like kind of kicked me in the shoulder. He's like, sir, hey, look around, dude. And I look around, and there's literally just like white Toyota Corollas
everywhere.
Like,
everywhere.
Guess we're just gonna die. Whatever. I mean, and obviously nothing happened. We got out of there and it was fine.
Right.
It's just like this sense of futility, and I think you just sort of like, even outside of the sort of like military industrial complex nastiness, just as a soldier in modern combat environments, you become very succinctly aware that like it has nothing to do with your like prowess as a warrior or like your ability to survive like in a fight. It is literally random. Like the first night we were there, we got rocketed, and it like landed pretty, not like immediately close, but pretty damn close to us. And I like grabbed, we were in this like big tent thing, and we were all asleep, and I like grabbed one of my soldiers, because he was just kind of like waking up. He's like, what the hell's going on? I was like, get in the ground. And I grabbed him, and I like laid on top of him, and I was like, everybody get down. And the rockets are going off. And I remember thinking like, why am I even like laying on him? Because if we get hit with this thing, like it's not going to matter. Yeah, I know. And so all that kind of stuff just really started to like affect my perception of what this whole thing was. And I already had a feeling that it was all like very wrong. But it wasn't until I like saw it firsthand, and I was like, nah, this is not it. And, I mean, I have so much empathy for like, especially like, say, for example, Ukraine, like people like trying to defend their doorstep from, this massive invading army. But I also feel so conflicted about it, because it's like, President Biden just got on the news the other day and was like, hey, we're giving $100 billion to Ukraine and Israel. And it's like, where does this end? Because we don't, we don't have any vested real interest in this. It's like, I feel like it's just, like, we're just writing these checks. Yeah. Or just Big Brother. And everything here is
just
like,
become Big Brother.
Right. But the most upsetting aspect of it, outside of the senselessness of warfare and the civilians that utterly suffer and die because of that all the time, the other really upsetting aspect is like, look at what is going on here. Like infrastructure is collapsing. We have no access to healthcare. We have massive student loan debt. I mean, it's like on and on and on. There's all these problems, that we're doing nothing about. But everybody's just like, as soon as like these figureheads like go, it's time to go to war, all these idiots are just like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Let's send your kid, not mine, but yours. Yeah. So, and then they gather up all these marginalized groups of people, the poor and minority groups, and they send them off disproportionately to war. Yep. And it's the same thing, and we're just not learning. And that's the real horror movie.
It is. It absolutely
holy
is.
Shit. So I don't know. And that's like what I'm trying to do with this music, is just kind of like, for me, it's like, I just feel so like, exhausted sometimes, and it feels like numbing to even try to care, because it's like, what am I? Like, who am I'm just like some dude, but what am I going to change? But I hope
remember this: one voice becomes two voices become 10 voices become 100. So
exactly.
It's all about you still have a voice, and while you have it, use it.
Right. I mean, I really hope that when I leave this earth, I can look back in those final moments and be like, I really tried hard to like make things better. Because I really believe in that. I really believe that, like you said, just it's like your voice, amplifies with everybody else's, and we're all like doing these tiny little things, but it all accumulates and it creates sea change. And that's just like, I think about like iconic songs that really have affected me. And I love music, and I love like, especially, goth and post-punk stuff, but there's some like really beautiful, iconic songs that remind me of like our humanity. And like one of those songs is like Sunday Bloody Sunday by U2. Yeah. That's a song where it's like, you feel it every single time, and I'm a huge fan of like their early discography.
Yeah.
But when and I've seen them live, and when they play that live, it's like you feel, it feels reverent and special, and it's a beautiful thing. And I think it just reminds people like, hey, we have to pay attention, because these atrocities will just keep happening if we don't.
Well, what's interesting is even earlier than that for me was Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
A lot of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like
that's always been a big influence for me, was Pink Floyd. So
yeah. Oh, here's got, I'm a huge, like my dad was like a big, like kind of classic and prog rock guy, but also new wave. So I got a heavy dose of Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and, like Genesis and all that stuff when I was.
That's what I loved about them, is they were very dark. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were very melodic and cool, and everyone calls them like, what do you call it? Acid rock or stoner rock. It's not at all. It's very heady.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Heavy in the message.
If you get to The Wall.
Oh yeah.
The Wall is like, that is one of the darkest records, and especially the movie that they made.
Yeah. One of my favorites ever.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. And it's such a beautiful masterpiece of just like, I think that album with the movie is like the perfect confluence of film and music coming 100%. Together, with animation too. That's just like insane. That's just 100%.
It's amazing film. Yeah. Soundtrack, and just really affects you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But, so I'm hoping to do with this, like, we just put out this video that's a little more of like the aforementioned sort of party horror. It's not.
We were gonna get into that, because I'd like to show it off.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with Fangoria with regards to that?
So it's kind of funny, because like, I grew up with Fango. Like my first one that I ever bought from a newsstand, I was 13. They did a retrospective of The Beyond by Lucio Fulci, and it was the like caved in head of that like girl that the doctor like plugs with the 357 mag in the end of the movie when everybody turns into zombies. And it's just like this gnarly, just super graphic cover. And I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And I remember grabbing it, and I was like, oh, it's horror movies. And this is like when I was really starting to like find my love for horror. And I just flipped through it, and I was like, I have to buy this. And I remember going, can I buy this? Like, because this, like, it just seemed like there's no way they're going to let me. So I go up and I bought it, and the guy at the register like scanned it, and he's like, can you buy this? And I was like, I don't know, man. And he's like, he scanned it, and there was no like age thing. So he's like, all right, here you go. And I was like, holy shit. And I had to like hide it, because my parents are really cool, but I mean, I was 13. I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to have this. So anyway, I bought it for years, but as far as this whole thing with Fangoria with us, I got a call like out of the blue one day, and just like a voicemail. It basically was Phil, the chief editor of Fango, and he was just like, hey, I got in touch with a friend of mine who you're friends with. That's Ryan Turek, who's the executive producer for Blumhouse.
Uh-huh.
Him and his wife Ciara are like really good friends of my partner Scarlett and I. And we've just kind of met out in the wild. And he's like, I hope it's okay, but I really want to do a piece on you guys, like kind of like a sort of 1989 Rolling Stones sort of thing, like a multi-page article about your story, because I'm just fascinated by like all the things that you've done and been through. And I was like, what? And I called him back. I was like, hey, it's Dusty from Vision Video. What's up, man? And he's like, hey, it's good to meet you.
Wow,
what do you think about that? And I was like, yeah, of course. Like, let's do it, man. So he interviewed me for the, actually, funny enough, I have it right here for this. There's me. He didn't tell me that they were going to put me on the front too, which was wild. I was like, what? But yeah, we did this great interview, and he nailed the story. He got everything that I wanted to say, but also with the cool like horror stuff. Like we have this one song called "Organized Murder" that's about war, and we kind of nicked Tony Todd from Night of the Living Dead 1990, where he says this line where he's like, it was like a war. This is something nobody ever seen before. This is pure hell on earth. And I put that as a sample in the song because that's how I felt about warfare, and like seeing him in that movie now, like it really hits. I think if you're a veteran, you got to watch Night of the Living Dead.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
There's this moment he's in front of the fire. He's talking to Patricia Tallman's Barbara character, and he's sort of like digesting this like post-traumatic dump of experience. He's just getting it out, and she's just kind of like observing him, and he's just in it. And I'm like, man, I've been that. I've been like, I have moments like that where I have to like pull myself out of it, because most people think of like flashbacks as like, oh, I see, I'm in it. No, it's your brain just goes into that world and you get stuck in it, and sometimes it just verbally comes out. And I was like, man, that is on point. That is exactly how I felt about some of the things that I've been through. So anyway, we put it in the song, and he like really highlighted that and talked about that. And we went really deep into that, and it's just a great article. So that all happened. And around that same time, Phil, during the interview, actually, he's like, so you guys have anything coming out? And I was like, yeah, well, we have the third record. It's kind of in transit right now. It's being created, but it's called Modern Horror, ironically, or conveniently maybe. But I said, we're about to we're going to shoot this video for this song called "In My Side." It's actually one of our original songs from our first record. We re-recorded it with this new studio. Because sometimes when you know how it is, like you write a song, you play it 1,000 times, it changes.
Sure.
And it becomes something totally different. So we wanted to kind of capture the more like the energy that it has now, because it's just like a more energetic song. So we did that, and we were like, let's shoot this video that we always talked about doing, but we couldn't do because it was during the lockdowns. So we constructed this sort of like horror movie in a video, and it was based on the bass player, his partner Lindsay. Basically was like, you should do a video where like a witch like manipulates you guys on stage. So that was kind of the original concept. And then Dan and I like sat down and we like really fleshed out the monster, so to speak. Yeah. And so I told Phil about it, and we hadn't recorded it yet or filmed it yet. But I was like, yeah, we're kind of organizing this. It's in its infancy, but it will be out like around that, maybe the same time that the article will come out. And he's like, dude, we'll premiere it for you. And I was like, yes, awesome. Yes, this will be great. So all the pieces came together, a little bit of help from Ryan, but a lot of really the director he's 23 years old. His name is Elwood Quincy Walker. He's going to be a huge horror director. Like 10 years from now, everybody's going to know who he is because he's just awesome. Ryan sent me, he was like, he's like, hey man, I know the guy to direct this video. And he sent me this short film of Elwood's called Kissed. And you've got to check this thing out. It's so good. It's this like short film. And immediately I was like, that's the guy. So he sent me his number. I called him. We talked for 2 hours about the video. He's got so much energy. He was just like, dude, I've always wanted to do a music video. This sounds amazing. Like, I love the concept. Let's go for it. So him and I just started kind of sourcing people out. We kind of put out this sort of like through the channels, and we landed Haley Trefiro as the head of the makeup, the SFX makeup crew. We had 5 makeup artists, and we got a few character actors from like The Walking Dead, because we're here in Athens. We're very close to Atlanta. Just like all these really cool people, stunt coordinator, prop master, like, and it became a real production. And this was the first time that we'd ever done this. Like, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But it's also, this is like back in, I guess, early September, and the strikes are still, they're still going.
They are.
But, everybody was like, hell yeah, let's do this. And they were super into the idea. And it was just so cool. We got the 40 Watt Club in Athens, which is like, I wanted the video to be kind of 2 things. I wanted it to pay like homage to horror, because I owe so much of that for keeping me sane and alive in a way. But I also wanted to pay homage to like Athens, Georgia, and the music scene here, because it's such an important part of the city and what we do here. And the 40 Watt Club is the venue. It's my favorite place in the world to play. It's just got this vibe. It's one of those places you walk in, you're like, I don't even know, like, I could go in there tonight. I don't even know what's playing, but you walk in, you're like excited because it has a cool energy to it. And I think we did both really well. It's a short horror film, but it's also like this kind of punk rock, love letter to Athens. And we shot it. We did it in 2 days. It was like 8 hours at night. The first night out actually at Tom Ashton of the March Violets, because he's like a good friend of mine. He lives here with his family. Yeah, he tours with us. He plays bass for us. Like, we're actually going to go to Europe in like a week and a half, and he's going to play bass for us on that tour. He's like one of my best friends. We shot a lot of videos out there, actually, but we shot for 8 hours, got a couple hours of sleep, and then we shot for like something like 19 hours the next day. And we just got it all done. And then Elwood edited it as well. And when he sent us that final version, I was just like, wow.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Just how it's literally, in my opinion, and I'm obviously partial, but it's just perfect. He just nails every single aspect of what I wanted to kind of convey visually, but also sort of thematically and through the energy of the video. And it's just super fun, and it's been wild. Like Cassandra Peterson, Elvira, like reposted it the other night, and then Joe Bob and Darcy the Mail Girl. I was like, whoa, this is just crazy. Like, it's just so cool that it's getting around. It's like an honor, it's like to know that you've participated in something that just nails it, and that's such a cool moment.
Well, let's show that off right now by showing that to our viewers.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Geez, Emily, if you didn't insist on taking us into the middle of nowhere, we might be there by now.
So we're gonna miss sound check again?
Doesn't matter to me. I'm always ready to play.
Do you even know where you're going?
You know what? You would have just...
I love that video. I actually love it a lot. So
Yeah.
Thank you for putting it out there and adding a little more inspiration for me to do what I do.
Dude, that's awesome. That means a lot to me. I mean,
It's fun.
you're like a hero. So like, I mean, I just
Well, you get more music videos, give me a call. Make sure you get my number.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I would love to bring you into that. That would be like just another like total dream come true. And I think what we're going to do is just sort of like, as we get towards this release, is we're going to make another one, kind of maybe a different, like a totally different vibe from that one.
Sure.
Something way darker and like more serious. But we were also like kicking around the idea of like connecting the sort of storyline a little bit, like having some like tangent that like spills out from that video. Cause I think it'd be fun to do like, a zombie movie in the city streets or something. I don't know.
I don't know if you ever heard of this band in the 80s in Los Angeles. There was a band called Ex Voto.
I don't
know if you've ever heard of them, but there was a music video they did called If I, and myself and a gentleman by the name Sean Schur, I want to say is his last name. We produced everything for that video on a video toaster. We shot it in a burned out building in downtown Los Angeles, and unbelievable stupid hours, unbelievably stupid human tricks like busting a pane of glass instead of having sugar glass, and I had everybody throw leather jackets over me with a camera, and it was I'm surprised I didn't get killed, but it turned out really cool, and those are the kinds of things that putting that stuff out there, even with the messages in it, it makes you feel better about your product. Like you're putting that message out there, and you're paying, not only paying homage, but you're still getting your message in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, it sort of like feels more real. Like I love music videos, and it's kind of funny because I feel like we're in this sort of like post music video time.
Yeah.
Because everything, like,
I don't think there's enough of them.
There's definitely not. But I think that there's still like, we're not like totally beyond this like sort of cultural zeitgeist of like the importance of them.
Right.
And I think like this thing really kind of proves that there's something, really valuable. And again, it's that like that confluence of art, or music and film coming together to make something that's just so much more spectacular than.
Absolutely. Music is storytelling. Music is storytelling. And if you want to get that story even further across the plate, how much better than to make a mini movie out of it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the song In My Side is kind of, I mean, it's again, party goth, like party horror vibes, but it's a very, it's about sort of being obsessed with or addicted to things that are really bad for you. Not necessarily like straight up addiction, but like, I was addicted to, chaos and adrenaline for a long time. And I needed to get that to feel dopamine for a long time until I kind of rewired my brain through therapy.
Right.
And that's really bad. Like, it's not good to be like, man, I hope something really horrible happens today at the fire. Like, that's just like a horror, because you start to feel really guilty because you're like, shit, this is people's lives, like this isn't fun. This is horrible. Like plugging gunshot wounds, you go back to the firehouse, you're like high-fiving, everybody in the crew, and it's like, good save. Awesome. But you're also like, but there was like a shooter right in the building next door. Yeah. And, I'm like covered in blood, and that guy, may died tonight. And you start to like process the reality. And it's like, you put up this screen to protect yourself, and you compartmentalize, but there's still very real ramifications to what's happening out there. Sure. But you still, it's like, it calls, and it still does. Like I feel it all the time. Like every single time I see an ambulance going lights and sirens, I'm like, man, I should be on that thing. Yeah. Cause I always like, I was a pretty damn good firefighter. I was a great paramedic. And because being a paramedic is like chess. It's like thinking 3 steps ahead, not just and then just keeping totally calm no matter what, just keeping your shit together. Because the second you lose it, that patient's like screwed. Yeah. So you know, I feel it all the time. And I'm like, but remember, like that call is not a good thing. So that's what the song is about. And I'm glad that like in the video, you know, it's like, so we have Lulu, who's she's like one of the top burlesque performers in the world, is our witch. And she's, you know, my favorite thing in the beginning, when we run her over, she curses me in that whispering voice. And that's actually, she's native Mohawk, and she's whispering Mohawk curses. So I'm like, man, maybe you should like uncurse me after this. But she's like,
have a sage ceremony, something.
Yeah. But she's like the literal physical metaphor for that whole thing for me, because she's this awful creature, but then she becomes this like beautiful, powerful, orchestrating, still a monster, but she's gorgeous and she's alluring. And it's like, and she's the thing that kills me in the end. And I'm like, that's the literal thing about it. And I was like, man, this is, you know, I mean, and it just seemed like, unless I explain it, it comes across as just like, it's just a fucking awesome video and it's just fun.
Yeah.
But there's so much to it. And that's why I love horror, because so many people will write this stuff off and they'll say, oh, it's just like monsters and gore and whatever. And it's just, no,
there's a subtext. Yeah. There's always a subtext.
I mean, look at every single horror movie, or not every single, but like so many of the great horror movies that came out in like 70s and 80s, like
Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead. It is a huge
subtext there.
Yeah, like Vietnam, civil rights. I mean, that's one of the pivotal times in the world. And then Dawn of the Dead, moving into commercialism, you know, Day of the Dead, nuclear proliferation and ultimate destruction of humanity. You know, I mean, just
horror has always been very political.
Yeah, and I think that it's such a cool vehicle that is still so unexplored in film. And there's just so much room for people to tell really important stories. And like I'm excited. I'm actually this December, I'm going to start writing a script about kind of post-traumatic stress. Like I'm going to write this story about these soldiers who go to war together, and they're like really good friends. One of them's kind of like he's like a little bit of a bastard, but he's like, he loves his guys. And the other one's like your everyman hero, and he has to kind of make a decision to save his friend, the bastard, or like save a civilian. And ultimately his friend dies, and then he comes home and he's like messed up in the head, but he's starting to process the world again. But then his friends start showing up and fucking things up. And like, but it's like literally happening. So it's not like a metaphor, like his friend is like actually coming back to ruin his life. So, you know, and I think like, there's just, like I said, there's room for so many different kinds of people that haven't been able to tell stories. Because I don't want to just write a script about like a soldier coming home and like dealing with PTSD. Like that's not interesting to me, because I think like one of my favorite authors of all time is Tim O'Brien. He wrote this book called The Things They Carried. And he was sent to Vietnam when he was like 19 or 20. And the book is about Vietnam, and it's kind of his story, but it's a sort of fictionalization of it. And in the middle of the book, he literally like talks to you, like he breaks the fourth wall, and he's like, this isn't real, but it is real. It's actually more real than the reality of what happened to me, because sometimes stories capture the reality more than anything that I could just tell you. Like I could tell you a story about how we went into the hills of, you know, of the highlands of Vietnam, and we marched all day and somebody stepped on a mine. Or I can tell you sort of a story about that, but not directly, but it captures the essence of that thing way better than the real story. And I think that is like really alluring to me about like horror, is like we can not exactly nail this like this scary thing with the literal nature of what happened, but more in the essence of what happens. And that's awesome. That's a really cool thing.
Well, that's awesome, man. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just about out of time. And I wanted to wrap up by having you plug and tell people where we can find you, where we can find your music, and how to support you guys.
Hell yeah, thanks, man. So I mean, the hub for everything is just it's real easy. It's just visionvideoband.com. That has our tour dates that are upcoming. We keep that completely up to date. It has our merch, which we run ourselves. So like basically, if you want to buy a t-shirt, that goes a long way for us. Like that comes directly sourced from us. It has like links to all of our social media stuff. If you want to just go directly to social media, again, it's just Vision Video Band on basically every single platform. Yeah. So, and I'll say it this way. We have some great records and we have great songs, but we're way better live. So come see us. It's better seen live.
I'll vouch for that. I just kind of tripped over these guys and I really like them. So
oh yeah, thanks. Man.
Listen to them, give them a listen. Trust me, they're very good. And I would love to see them live. Thanks again, Dusty, so much for being with us today.
Total honor. Thanks, Nick.
Hopefully we can have you back on again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you all out there who are listening to this podcast. So just a friendly reminder that Hypodermic is brought to you by UA Acoustics, quality acoustic treatments that don't break the bank. You can visit them at www.ua-acoustics.com. That is www.uaacoustics.com. Nick, this has been another great episode. I'll see you next week. Thank you, Dusty, for joining us. This podcast will be available on all major podcast platforms, anywhere you consume audio video content. This has been TJ Bowser. That is Nick Benson. That is Dusty from Vision Video. And I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
It's the Wild Kingdom at Kenny Carden with Rabbit Furs by Nikki. Tiger. Lion. Leopard. Fox. Panther. Complete your call of the wild with accessories by infant to teen.